I'm Mary Linnell Sawyer Potter. I was born in Georgetown, Texas on March the 3rd, 1937. I was born at home. My mother's mother, whose name was Mary Living, she was there, and my dad was there, I guess a doctor and nurse, and my mother was there, and I was there for sure. I, of course, do not remember much my first year of life. But I had the same parents as my two siblings later, and as I said, there's not much I can remember about the very first part of my life. The first memories, I think, that I had may have been after we had moved from Georgetown, and I think then my parents moved to California, and my dad went to school out there, engineering school or something, and I don't remember any of that. But then we came back to Texas, and I remember living at Austin when I was pretty young. And I remember we lived in an apartment there, in an apartment house, and there was a big backyard that we could play in. And my mother took care of a lady that lived across the hall and down a ways, in the same building, on the same floor. She had a baby, and my mother took care of that baby. I remember that. And I remember also, while we were there, that I looked out into the backyard, and there was this dog. He looked like a horse to me. It was a Great Dane, and he was huge. But to me, being little, he looked like a horse. And I remember that very well about that place. I remember another time when we lived in Austin again. I don't know exactly what age I was or anything, but I must have been fairly young. But I remember the apartment we lived in. We lived on, I guess, the second story of it. But you could walk out on the porch and look down into the yard. And I remember that about that place. I'm not sure where we moved after that. But I know that we moved around a lot. I know that we at one point, but this, when I was in first grade, I remember.
What's she cussing about?
I'm recording for.
In first grade, we lived on my dad's daddy's place, and it was a big farm, and they had a mean bull, they had other cattle, they had some.
Now this was on your
and
grandpa's place?
That was my dad's dad, yeah, my grandpa's place. And we spent a lot of time there because they built us a house further down on the property. And to me, it was a pretty long ways from where they lived. But I guess it wasn't all that long, really, in reality. But there was a creek running through there, and we had to cross the creek to get up to their place. And while living there, I remember going to school in first grade. Now, I had cousins. I went to school with one of my cousins, and Joe Perry. And then I also went to school with my aunts and uncles from my dad's half brothers and sisters. My dad's mother had died, and his dad remarried, and they had 4 children. And I went to school with all of them, plus this cousin. And we went to school there at Buda. We lived on, it was all out in the country, and we had to ride a bus, and we had to walk a ways to get to the bus, but we went there to Buda, and the Buda school was kind of, I guess you would say, horseshoe shaped. And in the open area between the 2 outside parts of the building, on one side was your lower grades, on the other side was the high school. And my aunts and uncles, I guess, were all over in the high school part. And I was over with my cousin we were in the same grade. And the reason being I had had appendicitis and had an emergency surgery on that in New Braunfels, Texas, and earlier, and they held me back a year. So he's a year younger than me, but we were in the same class because I didn't get to go the first year. And anyway, we lived, went to school there and rode the school bus home. Now there's a couple of kind of funny incidences there while I was going to school there, and one that was not so good. But while I was going to school there one day, my aunts and they came and they checked on me at recess and at lunchtime when we were having lunch. And so one day they couldn't find me. They hunted all over for me. And then after lunch was over, I showed up. And I wanted to know where in the world I'd been. Well, I had went home with a little girlfriend of mine. I took my lunch in my paper sack, went home with her and stood at their table or sat at their table and ate my lunch while the rest of them, her family, ate theirs.
And you were how old?
I was in first grade, so around 7, 6 or 7. 7, I guess, probably. And another incident was in school. We were all sitting there, and the teacher was teaching them that, and she looked down, and there was a wad of spit on the floor beside my desk, and she asked where that came from, who did that. And I told her I did. So she made me clean it up, which was kind of embarrassing to me, but I didn't know what I was supposed to do with all that mouthful of spit. So I just put it on the floor. And another thing was, one time I was in the bathroom when it was time for our buses to take us home. And I missed my bus. And so I had to go home with the school teacher. She took me home and then took me home to my home later. And her daughter lived with her, and she had a little baby, and thought that was fascinating. And but when she took me home, there was nobody there. My folks were gone. And I was supposed to have went home on the bus with my aunts and uncles and went to my grandpa's. But I didn't. I missed it. So anyway, I walked around there a while, and I sat down. We had a little roof to cover the washing machine that we had outside, and to do the washing out there, we had to do our washing outside, and because we didn't have electricity. we so I finally got brave enough because it was getting dark.
You want some of your water? It's down beside you there.
It was getting dark, and I was getting scared because I knew that mean bull was loose. And there was no fences or anything to keep him from coming down to our place where we lived at. And so he came down there a lot. And anyway, we took and I put my books in the washing machine, I think, or put them somewhere there, but I think it was the washing machine. It was a gas ran washing machine. And I put it in there, and I took off up towards my grandpa's and scared all the way because I was afraid that bull might come and charge me. And then I had to go right past the barn where all the animals were kept at night and that. But I made it up to my grandpa's, and that's safe and sound. Another thing that happened while I was going to school there at Buda was we had a school bus wreck. There was and I know now, God planted that little sapling tree there that grew up there, and it was just a very young tree, but a strong one, I'd say, because we had the school bus wreck, and the school bus went over the embankment. There
What
was a deep.
What caused the wreck?
Well, what caused the wreck was a high school girl had a crush on the bus driver and was throwing, we wore headscarves back then, and she took her headscarf and was throwing it over his face and pulling it off and that. And he went off the road and down the embankment, and the first thing we knew was everybody was going, the seats were long seats where 2 or 3 kids could sit on a seat. We didn't have seat belts or anything to hold us in, but they were facing one another, so you had like a booth that they might have in a cafe or something, only it didn't have a table in between, but your seats were facing one another. And so the next thing I knew, dust was flying everywhere. Everybody was bouncing up to the ceiling of the school bus and then back down, and books flying and paper flying and dirt everywhere you couldn't hardly see. And with a thud we stopped, and it was that little tree that was planted by the tank of water. Otherwise, we would have rolled right into that tank of water. And there would have probably been bad results of that.
Was anyone hurt in the wreck, or?
I don't know that anybody was seriously hurt, but there was some bruises and scratches and stuff, but I didn't really get hurt. I got scratched up and that, but and I grabbed some books. I don't know why. I guess I've always loved books, but I grabbed some books thinking they might be my school books, you know. I was trying to rescue them. And it turned out I think some belonged to my uncles or something there. But anyway, we got out the back door of the school bus. That was the exit, you know, and for anything, emergencies. And they got the back door open and we got out and
Did the girl or him get in trouble?
I don't remember what happened, but I do remember that we refused to ride the school bus after that for a long time.
Did you just walk, or what happened?
Yes, it was 5 miles to school.
And that was first grade, or that was later?
That was in the first grade.
Okay.
Because we had to move after that. We moved, our family did. And then moving, we had to leave behind. We had to sell the cows we had and all of that. And it was very heartbreaking, very touching that we had our milk cows, and my mother milked them most of the time, and because my dad worked at the base. And
So that was pretty much your first early years through first grade experience. Okay, we'll stop there and then we'll pick up when y'all move on the next one.